The girl says to the billionaire, "Hi, sir. My mother has a ring just like yours." And the billionaire, in life, some encounters seem like fate. Moments so unexpected, yet so powerful, that they can change everything. Sometimes, the past we bury has a way of finding us again, in ways we never imagined. And for one man, a simple visit to a jewelry store would unravel a truth he had never seen coming. But before we get into the full story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. The soft chime of a doorbell echoed through the quiet elegance of a high-end jewelry boutique. The space shimmered with the glow of diamonds, gold, and luxury, each piece placed with precision under spotless glass. In the middle of it all stood Sebastian King, a man known to the world as a billionaire, a ruthless businessman who built an empire from the ground up. He was powerful, confident, always in control. But today, something was different. He held a ring between his fingers, turning it slowly under the bright lights. It wasn't just any ring. It was an exact replica of one he had lost years ago. A ring that once belonged to someone he had loved, someone he had tried to forget. His expression remained unreadable, but deep inside, memories stirred like ghosts from a past he had long buried. As he stood there, lost in thought, a small voice broke the silence. "Hi, sir." Sebastian blinked and turned his head slightly. Standing beside him was a little girl, no older than 7 or 8, her brown curls bouncing as she tilted her head curiously. She clutched a well-loved teddy bear in one hand, her innocent eyes fixed on the ring he was holding. "My mother has a ring just like yours," she said, her voice light, completely unaware of the storm her words had just unleashed. Sebastian's fingers stiffened around the ring. His sharp blue eyes darkened as he turned to face the child fully. "Your mother?" he asked, his voice steady, but carrying an edge of something unreadable. The girl nodded eagerly, her smile bright. "Yes, she always wears it. She says it's very special." Sebastian's heart pounded against his ribs. That was impossible. The original ring had been one of a kind. The only person who had ever worn it was. No, he shook off the thought. It couldn't be. And yet, something about the little girl's innocent declaration sent an unsettling chill down his spine. "What's your name?" he asked carefully. "Mia," she chirped, swinging her teddy bear back and forth. "I came here with my mom. She's over there." She pointed toward the back of the store. Sebastian followed her gaze, and the moment his eyes landed on the woman standing by the glass cases, his entire world tilted. His breath caught in his throat. The air around him suddenly felt too thin. The woman turned slightly, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a brief second, Sebastian felt as if he was staring at a ghost. It couldn't be. His heart slammed against his chest. He knew that face. He had memorized every detail of it, even after all these years. Emily, the woman who had disappeared from his life. 7 years ago, the woman he thought he would never see again. She was here, and she was wearing that ring. Sebastian took a slow step forward, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. How was this possible? Where had she been all these years? And if it really was her, then why? Why had she never come back to him? Before he could move closer, a small hand tugged at his sleeve. "Sir?" Mia's voice was softer now, her big, innocent eyes looking up at him. "Are you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Sebastian inhaled sharply, trying to steady himself. He forced his gaze away from Emily and looked down at the little girl. His chest tightened. Mia. Her wide eyes, her small bright smile. Something about her features struck him in a way he couldn't ignore. A realization was forming in the back of his mind, one that he wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Mia," he said, his voice quieter now. "What's your mother's name?" The little girl grinned proudly. "Emily." Sebastian's entire body went rigid. His jaw clenched, his grip on the ring tightening until his knuckles turned white. Emily. The name hit him like a lightning bolt, electrifying every nerve in his body. 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of searching for answers he never found. 7 years of believing she was gone forever, and now she was standing just a few feet away, completely unaware that the past was about to crash into her like a tidal wave. Mia let go of his sleeve and skipped toward her mother, completely oblivious to the storm she had just stirred. Sebastian barely noticed anything else. His focus was locked on Emily. And then she turned. Her gaze met his. For a split second, time froze. Emily's expression shifted, the gentle smile she had been wearing slowly fading as recognition hit her. She stiffened, her fingers instinctively curling around the ring on her hand. The weight of the unspoken words, lost years, and unanswered questions hung between them like an invisible storm. Sebastian clenched his jaw, his emotions warring between shock, anger, and something deeper, something more painful. She was here, after all these years, and she had his ring. And then, Sebastian noticed something else, something that made his blood run cold. Mia, the little girl, with pus, Emily's eyes, and a resemblance he couldn't ignore. Sebastian's pulse pounded in his ears, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, as a terrifying realization slammed into him with the force of a tidal wave. He swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mia?" he said, his throat dry. "How old are you?" Mia beamed up at him. "I'm 7. I'll be 8 soon." Sebastian exhaled sharply, his entire world tilting beneath him. 7 years. Emily had been gone for 7 years. And Mia was 7 years old. His eyes snapped back to Emily, his breath uneven, his heart hammering in his chest. Emily looked away as if already knowing what he was about to ask. Sebastian's voice dropped lower, filled with something raw. "Is she?" Emily swallowed hard. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Sebastian took a slow, deliberate step forward. He didn't need her to answer. He already knew. Mia was his daughter, and Emily had kept her from him. All these years, a whirlwind of emotions crashed over him. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she left? Why had she taken his child wise from him? Emily finally met his gaze, her eyes filled with something unreadable. "Sebastian," she murmured. "Please, it's not that simple." Sebastian clenched his fists, his entire body tense. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 7 years of pain. "Then make me understand," he said. But before she could answer, Mia turned back, holding up a small silver locket. "Mommy, look at this one," she said excitedly. Emily hesitated. Sebastian didn't take his eyes off her. This wasn't over, not even close, and this time, he wouldn't let her slip away so easily. The air between them felt heavy, thick with emotions. Neither of them had the courage to voice. Sebastian's mind was racing, struggling to process the truth that had just unfolded before him. Mia was his daughter, his child. And for 7 years, he had never known. Emily, the woman he had spent years searching for, the woman he had once given his heart to, had kept this secret from him. The weight of it pressed down on his chest, tightening with each second of silence that passed. Emily quickly turned back to the glass cases, her fingers gripping the edge of the display, as if grounding herself. Mia, still oblivious to the storm raging between the two adults, held up the small silver locket, looking between them with a bright smile. "Mommy, should I get this one?" she asked, her excitement untouched by the tension in the air. Emily forced a smile, her voice softer than before. "Maybe later, sweetheart." Mia pouted, but nodded, skipping off toward another section of the store. Sebastian took a step closer to Emily, his voice low but intense. "We need to talk." She hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. She knew this moment was inevitable, but she wasn't ready. How could she ever be ready? "There's nothing to talk about, Sebastian," she said quietly. His jaw tightened. "Are you serious? You disappear for 7 years, and I find you with my daughter, and you're telling me there's nothing to talk about?" Emily flinched at the sharpness in his voice, stealing a glance toward Mia, who was still busy admiring jewelry, blissfully unaware of the growing storm between her parents. "Not here," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not in front of her." Sebastian exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. He wanted answers. Now. But he wasn't about to cause a scene in front of Mia. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. "Where?" Emily hesitated again, before finally whispering, "There's a cafe across the street. Give me 5 minutes." Sebastian didn't reply. He simply turned on his heel and walked out of the store, his head pounding. Outside, he stood near his car, trying to steady his breathing. 7 years. 7 years of searching, wondering what went wrong, believing she had left him without a trace. And all this time, she had been raising his child. He clenched his fists, a mix of anger, pain, and something deeper swirling inside him. Was she ever planning to tell him? Would he have ever known if Mia hadn't spoken to him? The sound of soft footsteps behind him pulled him from his thoughts. He turned. Emily stood there, her coat wrapped tightly around her, as if shielding herself from the conversation they were about to have. Without a word, they crossed the street to the cafe. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the cold tension between them. They found a quiet corner table. Sebastian leaned forward, his piercing gaze locked onto her. "Start talking." Emily took a slow breath, gripping her coffee cup as if it could somehow steady her. "I didn't do this to hurt you," she said softly. Sebastian let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't hurt me. You took my child away from me, Emily. 7 years. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Pain flickered across her face, but she held his gaze. "I had no choice." His eyes narrowed. "There's always a choice." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "Not back then." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Explain." Emily looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. She had replayed this conversation in her head 1,000 times over the years. But now that it was happening, she didn't know where to begin. "You don't understand the world you come from," she whispered. "You think your money and power protect the people you love, but they don't. If anything, they put a target on them." Sebastian frowned. "What are you talking about?" Emily exhaled shakily, finally lifting her eyes to meet his. "Your business, your empire. It's not just about money. It's about power, connections. And some of those connections are dangerous." Sebastian's stomach twisted. "What does that have to do with you leaving?" Emily swallowed hard. I didn't leave because I wanted to, Sebastian. I left because I had to. Because someone close to you, gave me no other option. A chill ran down his spine. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. Who? Emily hesitated, but the fear in her eyes was real. Your father. Sebastian's entire body stiffened. His father. He shook his head. That's not possible. My father wouldn't. He did. Emily's voice trembled, but she held her ground. I was pregnant, Sebastian. I had just found out. I was going to tell you. But before I could, your father found out first. And he made it very clear that if I stayed, if I had your child, he would make sure neither of us was safe. Sebastian felt as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. His father had always been ruthless in business. But this was something else. You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Emily let out a humorless laugh. You know I'm not. Sebastian's mind raced. His father had always controlled every aspect of his life. But would he have truly gone that far? He threatened you? Sebastian asked, his voice raw. Emily nodded. He gave me one choice. Leave and protect my baby. Or stay and suffer the consequences. She looked away, her eyes glistening. So, I left. Sebastian's throat tightened. Why didn't you come to me? Emily shook her head. Because you were under his control. And I knew that if I told you, you would have fought for me. And that fight, it could have destroyed everything. Sebastian clenched his fists. His father had taken everything from him. His child, the woman he had loved. 7 years. 7 years wasted. He took a shaky breath. Where is he now? Emily hesitated. I don't know. But if he finds out you know about Mia. She trailed off, fear flickering in her gaze. Sebastian's expression darkened. He won't touch her. He won't touch either of you. Emily looked at him, uncertainty clouding her face. You can't protect us from him, Sebastian. His jaw tightened. Watch me. Emily exhaled, shaking her head. You don't understand the kind of man he is. Sebastian's voice was steel. And he doesn't understand the kind of man I've become. For the first time in years, Emily saw something in Sebastian's eyes that made her heart pound. Determination, rage, promise. This wasn't over, not even close. Emily could see it in Sebastian's eyes. This wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. A fire had been lit inside him, and he wasn't going to let it die out. She reached across the table, gripping her coffee cup as if it could ground her. Sebastian, if your father finds out you know the truth, he'll do something. He's not the kind of man who lets loose ends stay untied. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I don't care, Emily sighed, her fingers tightening around the cup. You should. I've spent years looking over my shoulder, making sure Mia is safe. I can't let her be in danger just because you want revenge. Sebastian's eyes softened slightly. This isn't about revenge, Emily. This is about righting a wrong. He took 7 years away from me, away from Stas. He doesn't get to win. Emily exhaled, pressing her lips together. She wanted to believe that Sebastian could fix this, that he could stand against his father and protect their daughter. But deep down, she knew what his father was capable of. Before either of them could say another word, Sebastian's phone buzzed. On the table, he glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. It was an unknown number. Without hesitation, he answered. Who is this? A deep, familiar voice came through the speaker. Sebastian. Sebastian froze. The sound of his father's voice sent a chill down his spine. I see you've been catching up with old friends, his father continued, his tone cold and calculated. That's disappointing. Sebastian's grip on the phone tightened. "Where are you?" His father chuckled, a slow, menacing sound. "The better question is, where are you? Where? And more importantly, where is your daughter?" Sebastian's blood ran cold. His gaze snapped to Emily, who had gone pale. "You stay away from her," Sebastian growled. His father sighed. "I tried to keep things simple. I tried to keep you focused. But you just had to dig, didn't you?" A pause. "You leave this alone, Sebastian, and I'll let it go. Keep pushing, and you'll regret it." Sebastian's hands clenched into fists. "If you even think about coming near Mia..." The line went dead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what just happened settled over them like a suffocating fog. Emily's hands trembled. "He knows, Sebastian. He knows about Mia." Sebastian shot up from his seat. "We're leaving." Emily hesitated. "Where?" "My place. He won't touch you there." Emily knew there was no use arguing. They needed to get to Mia. Now. They rushed back to the store, their hearts pounding. When they arrived, Mia was still inside, happily looking at a stuffed bear near the counter. She turned and smiled when she saw them. "Mommy, look, it has a little bow." Emily's heart clenched. She forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's adorable, sweetheart." Sebastian knelt down in front of Mia. His expression, gentle but serious. "Hey, kiddo, how about we go on a little adventure?" Mia's eyes brightened. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah, just you, me, and your mom. Sound good?" Mia giggled. "Okay." Emily met Sebastian's gaze. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. They had to move. Fast. The drive to Sebastian's penthouse was tense. Emily kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see a car following them, but nothing. When they arrived, the building's security let them in without question. Sebastian's penthouse was vast and luxurious, but Emily barely noticed. She was too focused on Mia, who was completely unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. That night, after Mia had fallen asleep in one of the guest rooms, Emily stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city lights. Sebastian joined her, standing close, but not touching. "He won't stop," she whispered. Sebastian exhaled sharply. "I know." Silence stretched between them before Sebastian spoke again. "But neither will I." Emily turned to him, her eyes filled with fear, with hope. "What are you going to do?" Sebastian's gaze was unwavering. "End this." The next morning, Sebastian made a call. One he had never imagined making. "Find him," he ordered. His team, loyal, powerful, and just as ruthless as his father's, was already moving before he even hung up. Hours later, he got the confirmation. His father was at one of his private estates. Guarded but vulnerable, Sebastian wasted no time. He arrived at the estate alone, walking through the doors like he owned the place. His father was waiting in the grand living room, seated like a king on his throne. He smirked when he saw Sebastian. "I knew you'd come." Sebastian's expression was cold. "You made a mistake." His father sighed, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You don't understand, do you? Everything I did was to protect you." Sebastian's fists clenched. "You don't get to decide what's best for me. You don't get to decide who I love or who I have a family with." His father's smirk faded. "Love makes you weak, Sebastian." Sebastian took a step closer. "No, it makes me stronger. And if you ever come near Emily or Mia again, I will not destroy you." His father studied him for a long moment, then chuckled. "So you finally grew a backbone." He leaned back in his chair. "Fine, I'll back off. But remember this, power comes with a price. If you're not willing to pay it, someone else will. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I'll take my chances. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving his father behind. Back at the penthouse, Emily was pacing when Sebastian returned. When she saw him, she rushed over. What happened? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He won't touch us. Emily's eyes searched his. Are you sure? Sebastian nodded. I made it clear. A long silence stretched between them. Then, Emily did something she hadn't done in years. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Sebastian froze for a second before pulling her close, burying his face in her hair. You don't have to run anymore, he whispered. Emily pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. And you don't have to fight alone. For the first time in years, Sebastian felt something he had forgotten was possible. Peace. He looked toward the guest room where Mia was sleeping, then back at Emily. We're a family, he murmured. Emily smiled, her eyes shining. Yeah, we are. And for the first time in 7 years, they finally had a future to look forward to. Together.